this is podcast episode number 24 on the Freely Roaming podcast.
With Molly Mesh.
With Dan and Marlene.
Of Molly Mesh.
It's entirely too long. We need to figure out how to simplify.
Who are these people?
I don't know.
We have multiple personalities.
It's Freely Roaming, right? Because it's like this is our personality, that our identity, where we tell you guys things instead of showing you guys our lives. So Freely Roaming is we have this podcast, we have a website, we have a YouTube channel where I make videos. So we are doing two episodes a month, or one every other week. And this is episode 24. It is an even one, which means that this is one of our sort of show and tell episodes where we tell you guys stuff. Last week we had a great interview with Alexandria. Hope you guys saw that. And if you didn't, go check it out. You can just scroll through our podcast feed or our YouTube channel. You should be able to see it. We had a great conversation with her. She just broke some news about her future plans, which she didn't know, or maybe she just had inklings at the time when we talked to her. She was, we were talking about like traveling, and she even mentioned like possibly doing the Pan Am at some point, but I guess she still might. But she has since decided to go back to school in Colorado. Exciting. So that's really cool. I support anybody who wants to go to school. You should go to school, especially when you're young, right? This is your time. You still have a long future ahead of you. And especially for somebody who maybe hasn't spent a lot of time working and wants to kind of have that experience, pursue that career. And then, once you've sort of know exactly what you want to do, then, make the decision on what you want your longer term future to look like. So we want to congratulate her on that decision. That's very exciting. And today, though, we want to tell you guys, we're here in Panama City, Panama. We're in a hotel room, if you can't tell. Well, if you're on the video podcast, you can tell. This is not our van. We haven't made our van into a two queen beds side by side with high ceilings. Although, as much as we like that, this is not it. And we're also sitting in front of a big window looking out at the high rises in Panama City, which is pretty nice. It's a little overcast, and we have air conditioning in here. Yeah. Actually, we had to turn it down because the kids were really cold.
Yeah, we're not sweating, so this is a different kind of YouTube episode.
We have 2 days before we get on a plane, fly to Cartagena, where we'll start the South America leg of our journey. So we've been doing a lot of prep, which is why this episode's like a day late, or maybe 2 days late.
Yeah.
So, but that's okay. I think if you guys are listening for this information is hopefully good for a little while, because today we're going to talk about, being that we're on the very bottom part of Central America now, we want to talk about all of the border crossings and all the logistics that we have gone through in these last, I want to say 5 months of all of Central America. So starting with Belize, when we came back from the summer trip that we made to the U.S., we crossed back into Belize back in November, and it's almost May now. So in these last 5 months, we've crossed, I think, 6 borders: Belize, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. So 7 borders, actually.
Yeah, 7.
So we want to talk to you guys all about that. We have some info on our website about the crossing to Belize, but we want to put it all together here so that you guys can get a good idea about our mindset and how we prepare when we cross each one. Because I think outside of just like maybe cultural differences, language differences, the roads and stuff like that, those are all things that you can experience in other continents. When we're traveling through Europe, most of the countries that we travel through didn't have border crossings like this. We've only experienced a couple of them, which is like Turkey and Morocco. And when we go out of the Schengen zone, like Bosnia, Serbia, places like that, Montenegro. But here in Central America, it is every place you go. I mean, these countries are not that big, Some of them are really small, like Belize and El Salvador. And we only went through a small stretch of Honduras. So we had to go through a lot of borders. And some of these borders are a little challenging. So we want to give you guys everything you need to be able to kind of not just survive, but come very well prepared to get through these borders. And I will say, all of the border crossings, I rely on Marlene a lot to do the research and planning, because
you're winging it,
driving, right? So I'm navigating some stuff. So Marlene's doing a lot of the research, and luckily there's a lot of information on iOverlander.
Yeah. So iOverlander, every time somebody crosses a border, some people are really good about just adding, like, this is what even though this information is here from a year ago, but they'll say this is a little bit different, or this is pretty much the same, and they'll list step by step any problems they had. They'll write it down. So before every border crossing, that's some of the prep work I do, and we'll talk about all the prep that we do.
There's some prep that we do that applies to all the crossings. So the first section would be that, which is what we'll talk about, which is what kind of stuff is going to be things that you'll need at every border crossing. I mean, there's going to be minute differences, but generally speaking, they want all this stuff. So you just want to have it and be ready for it. And then as things change, you want to just adjust as you go from one country to another. So let's first talk about, before we go into the country per country differences, we'll just talk about the basic, like, globally things that you need.
10 things you need to be prepared to cross a border.
This is like a standalone video. Okay. But we're not going to break this one up to different videos. This is going to be just one long video for all of Central America. So you guys don't have to go anywhere else to get all the information.
One-stop shopping over here. Okay. First thing you need is your documents.
Yeah, obviously, you're going to want to have
originals,
all your paperwork, all your ducks in a row. Originals, of course, but you want to also make sure that you keep the originals safe, which means you also want copies.
Okay, but the originals, you need your passports, of course. Driver's license valid.
And if you can get an international driver's license just to have, we have them. They've expired since we got them, but we've also never had to use them.
No.
But we got them anyways.
Okay, and then for your car, you need your current registration, and you need, we have a title also.
And what's important about that is if you don't own your car entirely, let's say you still have a bank loan, your name is not on the title, or we just ran into this with a friend of ours, if you co-own your vehicle with a business, let's say it's like you have your own business and you wanted your business to also have the business name for tax purposes, that could be problematic. So we don't have that personal experience, but you want to look into that. And what might be necessary is for your business to be able to give you power of attorney to your personal name in a separate apostille document. So if you come across situations where you need that, you have that. But our friends who had this problem, they're having this problem getting their vehicle onto a ro-ro ship to go to Colombia. But through all the borders up until now, they haven't had any problems. Yeah. So if that is your situation, be aware of that. Get an apostille power of attorney from your business to yourself.
Okay, and if, the second thing is pet certificates, health certificates.
Oh, wait. One other thing. Some states or some Canadian provinces or countries no longer issue titles and registrations separately. So that's also come up.
Oh, even Vermont got rid of titles. So.
Vermont just recently combined them into one. So a lot of countries may not know that, and even in the U.S. So we have another friend who's trying to ship their Vermont titled vehicle from Florida to Colombia, and they ran into a problem where they're trying to get it onto a boat in Florida, and Florida says, oh, you need your title and registration. But then they have them reference Vermont's DMV website, and indeed they say Vermont no longer issues titles, but they're concerned that when they get to Colombia, Colombia won't let them in. But we don't think that's a problem once you get to Colombia, because British Columbia in Canada hasn't issued titles for a long time, and there are a lot of, maybe not a lot, but we know there's some BC people that have gotten into Colombia.
But that's not Central America, and we're a little off topic.
Well, I mean, shipping out, right? But I'm just saying that having your title and registration is nice if you have it, but if you don't have it, it may not be a problem.
Yeah, just make sure you go to your state websites and have
Maybe
it ready.
Print out the places where it says,
we don't have
that you
titles.
no longer do that. Okay, so vehicle documents, those are what you need. And then the next one is, like you said, is pets.
Pets. So you always, every time you cross a border, you're going to need a health certificate. And that usually has to be recent. Some countries will have it needs to be at least, or it can't be older than 10 days. Some are arbitrary. So it's a little bit frustrating with pets because nobody really states the rules 100% online, and it seems like it's really dependent on the customs agent or the agent at the border. So just make sure you have a health certificate. Rabies vaccines in Mexico and Central America only last a year here, even though our cats are vaccinated in Europe and it's supposed to last 3 years. They don't care. It expires every year, so you have to be on that. And you have to have the extra vaccines too, and they're really look at things like when every 30 days you have to give them the external parasite drops and internal parasites too, and they really want the lot numbers and the stickers for the rabies vaccine
from the vials.
So everything, we have a pet passport and we have that in there, so just make sure you really have all your little details, because they like to check every number.
Yeah, I just saw the video from that couple from the UK who went back to the UK from Mexico, and they wouldn't let their dogs fly because the vet didn't put the stickers from the rabies vial in their pet passport. So they had to give their dogs extra rabies shots to get that. So it's important. Especially, it's not so much going south from Mexico, going into Belize, going to Guatemala, it's not as important. But when you go into countries that have low rabies incidents, they really care a lot more.
And this is just also in general, you're going to have humans filling out your forms for your vehicle import papers and your health certificates, and people make mistakes. Your VIN number is going to be off, your rabies lot number can be off, passport number, and one little mistake will really ruin your border day. So every time you get a piece of paper from somebody, it's annoying, but you should check all the numbers and your name spelling and all that.
Yeah, and you make sure that your vehicle VIN is obviously the most important thing. That's how it identifies every vehicle. But even model name, model number, color, all of that has to match. I just saw somebody who's crossing from Mexico into Belize, and they had bought a car, and they had just done some brush on paint. They painted a mural, painted from white to blue with a bunch of stuff on it. It looked really cool, except when they were crossing into Belize, their registration said it was a white car. So he had to he was in no man's land. He had to go and get white paint and paint it over again white to get in. So they
don't do that then.
It's very important that everything matches.
Okay. Number 3, you need photocopies of everything, and you can be prepared and have a bunch of copies of your passport, your driver's license, your tip, your registration, not your tip, your title.
For the most part, black and white copies will do.
Yeah.
But just get plenty of them.
Yeah. And then sometimes you're going to need more copies, like what they just stamped in your passport book. And there's always a copy shop, grocery store with a copy machine all around. So it's not a big deal. You just have to make sure you have cash usually.
Usually you have to have cash. But for the most part, if you're at the border, there's going to be money exchange people.
Yeah.
Right? So as long as you got cash from the country that you're coming from, whether you're coming from Mexico, so you have to have some pesos. If you're coming from Guatemala, you have to have some quetzales. So you want to make sure you have cash, if not US dollars, at least from the country you're coming from. For the most part in Central America, a lot of countries accept U.S. dollars.
Yeah.
El Salvador and Panama, U.S. dollar is their like currency that they use for every day. So, that's very convenient if you just have dollars handy. But in Costa Rica, even though they have their own currency, they still widely accept U.S. dollars. So just have a bunch of U.S. dollars with you, whether you're European or Canadian or American, just have that. And then exchange for local currency as needed.
And it's super easy. There's going to be a guy with a fanny pack, or he's going to be holding a fat stack of hundreds.
Yeah, just walking around.
So, and
all the stuff they tell you about, like not have your valuables out and about. These guys are walking with wads of cash exposed, and they're just like waving it around.
And just know the exchange rate, so nobody's ripping you off. But one time you exchange and you got a better rate than it was being offered, so you just never know.
Well, because I think what happens is that these guys, they're changing money, so they're trying to make a certain amount of money from the exchange. So if they got a good rate, and they're just in their mind, okay, I need to get this percentage of profit, so that's going to be the number they have in their head. So in the meantime, that exchange number could have gone in your favor, so then now you're getting a good deal. So in Guatemala, we got a good deal. Yeah. So have cash, or be ready to exchange for some cash.
Okay, for prep, also, number 5, download your maps ahead of time, because you don't know how your cell reception is going to be in that new country.
Right.
You can only guess, but we've been in situations where like, oh crap, we don't have our maps and we don't have cell service, like we don't know where we're going, and it's it just makes it so stressful.
If you don't speak Spanish, you can't use Google Translate. There's offline download Google Translate packs that you can do too, but a lot of the times, like the Google Translate offline pack doesn't handle very specific like types of conversations.
But you should still download it.
You should still download it. Yeah. Simple stuff, have in there for offline.
Okay, so download maps, download languages. Okay, and before you cross, just choose your campsite so you know actually where you're going. Make a decision, do a little bit of research that this is going to be a good spot for the night.
How far you have to drive once you get through, because it's going to be unpredictable how long the border is going to take, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And you want to probably pick one that's relatively close, because if you're going into a new country and it takes longer than you expect, you don't want to drive at night, and you may end up driving at night a little bit if it takes a long time. So try to pick a place that's close.
Yeah.
And if you want to pick a nicer place that's further, then you at least have a place that's close as your backup.
Right.
If things don't go right, go to the close place. If you have more than enough time in a day, then you can keep going, and then you go to a place where you want to stay for a few days.
Okay, so number 8, start early. We're not morning people, but on border days, we are
as early as we'll ever be.
Yeah, so because some borders take 2 hours, some take 6 hours, and you're always dealing with 2 countries. You have to exit a country and enter a new one. So
sometimes you try to do 2 borders in the same day, and they take 6 hours each.
And you cry a little bit, but we got through it.
Foreshadowing.
Okay, and before we cross, we also stock up. So we make sure we have some foods that are not banned, some snacks, water.
The best thing is to have like canned foods or packaged foods.
Yeah.
Because generally they're not going to take those from you. They're going to take fresh fruits, fresh meat.
Yeah.
Maybe alcohol, drinks like that.
But it's also like gas for your car, water, make sure you have propane, just like little things like that. Just make sure you're stocked up. Yeah,
because you're coming from a country that you've been in for a while, maybe even just a few days or a couple weeks. So you're somewhat familiar with what it's like there. So you're going into a new country that you may not. Yeah. Most of Central America, a lot of things are similar. So, it won't be as different, but still it's better to just go into a country having as many things as you're allowed to bring in ready to go. So if you fumble for a couple days trying to figure out where you're going to be and where to buy stuff, you'll be okay.
And the last thing we recommend is, I guess we kind of talked about, but pick a route.
Yeah.
So you know which way you're driving in case offline maps doesn't work, your phone doesn't work, but you have an idea.
Well, this also includes like picking the border crossing you're going to make, right? That'll determine when you after you get in, like, you know, just look ahead on the map a little bit. Look at the route, what's along the way. If there's a grocery store, or if you need to get a SIM card, if there's a place to get a SIM card, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, so those are the 10 things that we want to do every time, regardless which country we cross into. And then, you know, then we can talk about like specific countries, and then there's like little minute differences here and there. So we can give you guys some ideas about what's unique about each one.
You're going to always deal with this. So every border, like you said, it's going to be a little bit different taxes, what you pay for, different.
But generally speaking, we're
Yeah.
going to first give you some commonalities
Yeah.
across all of them.
Okay, so number one, we're always going to exit the country you're leaving. You can't just show up, say, I'm ready, Guatemala, I'm here from Belize. No, you have to exit from Belize
Okay, he doesn't want to
first
be here.
before you go to Guatemala. So you're always going to exit that country.
Yeah, there's going to be a no man's land. Unlike a lot of countries in Europe, and like U.S. Mexico doesn't really have that. U.S. Canada doesn't really have that. But in Central America, there's always no man's land. You check out of one country, and then you're not allowed to go back anymore. But you haven't gotten into the other one yet.
Yeah. And sometimes that no man's land is like
A couple miles.
Or full of people.
Yeah.
And vendors, and you're like, this is not no man's land, but
Yeah.
okay. So it's just, sometimes it's just like, what's happening here? Okay, so you're always going to exit the country. You know, we exit as
Cancel
people.
your tip.
You exit, yeah.
Yeah, you stamp out of your passport.
Yeah, you got to, exit as a person, exit as a vehicle. Sometimes you have to exit the pets, which is another headache, but some countries require that. We'll get to that. So you have to exit as people. So sometimes they stamp your passport. I think they always
usually do. Yeah, they always do.
So you exit as
You
a
have a
person.
record.
Yeah, exit as a person. And then you have to exit your vehicle.
Cancel your
which
temporary import permit. And for the most part, if I can remember correctly, just about every country, if not all the countries, will want to look at your canceled tip from the previous country.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure you do that.
Okay. And then sometimes some countries require you to even exit your pet. So you have to export your pet
Right.
out of that country before.
Not all.
No.
Not all, but we'll talk about which ones do.
Okay. And then once that's all done, there could be a little no man's land, or they could not be. And then you enter that country. So the same thing, but now we're entering, importing ourselves.
So you're gonna get to immigration, and they're usually separated. You know, you just ask for it, and a lot of the time it's not obvious where it is.
No.
No.
And there's no signs. or
So
maps.
you're gonna have to ask them. You know, migración is what you ask for, and then you get in line for that, and then that's where you show your passport, and they look through all the stuff, make sure you stamped out to the previous country, make sure your passport is valid, make sure it's you in the photos, all that, and they stamp you in. Sometimes they charge you a entry fee, like a tourist tax.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they charge you the fee when you exit.
Yeah.
We'll talk about which ones do that. And then after that, you go to do your car, and then your car, basically the same process, and that's usually in customs, and that's called aduana, and that's a Spanish word for customs. And then you kind of have to do the same thing. They may want to see your previous exit paper for your car, and then you have all your originals and copies ready.
And then as you drive into a country, a lot of times they want to fumigate you and charge you for that. So sometimes it's like a few bucks, sometimes $5-10.
It just looks like a drive-through car wash, except getting your car washed, you're getting poison sprayed on the outside of your car.
So just make sure your windows are rolled up and your vents are closed, and you turn off your
And if
air
you
conditioning.
if you can, you know, hose it off when you can, but we usually don't have a place to go hose off. In Central America too is like there's no, you think about North America, there's a lot of self-service car wash places. That's not a thing in Central America.
So we just tell the kids don't touch the car for a while, and
Yeah.
and sometimes you drive through and there's nothing gets sprayed, but you still pay. So
you still pay.
I prefer that.
But if you're coming here between like May and November, it's going to be rainy season, so
Yeah.
most likely the rain will wash it off.
Yeah, we somehow avoided rainy season completely.
But we've been in
Central
some
America.
heavy rain.
Yeah, we
We
have.
still have been in some heavy rain.
Import your pet. Sometimes it's with agriculture and fumigation. A lot of times it's a separate office or building, and then you have to deal with them looking at your pet passport and health certificates and
Yeah,
all
and
that
this is
stuff.
like-
and pay a little bit depending on the country.
This is usually in the agricultural inspection office where this happens.
Yeah.
Because your pets are considered just animals, like if you're going to bring in like livestock,
Yeah.
right? So that's where this happens generally in every border. Yeah, you're going to find out where the agricultural import office is. And that's where they'll look at all your vaccinations. They'll look at, they don't usually look at the pets themselves.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't care.
Yeah, but they usually will want a health inspection paperwork within a certain number of days.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah. I think it's also important to say, we haven't said it, maybe it's obvious, but it's going to be hot. Like, so hot. You cannot leave your pets in the car while
Yeah.
you're running these errands and paying for your tip and stuff.
maybe if you're running your air conditioning, somebody's in the car with them.
Yeah, sometimes we do that with the kids,
Yeah.
but when you have to get out of the car and everybody needs to get their passport stamped, just have, like, of course your dog's gonna have a leash, but for your cat, make sure you have pet backpacks, and you can be in the, at least monitor how they're doing
Yeah.
in the heat, and some of the
You can find
offices
shade.
are air conditioned.
Right, because your car may not be in the shade.
Yeah, a lot of times, yeah.
Central America is hot all the time, you know. So if you're thinking, oh yeah, I'll just go into winter, that's not really a thing. Winter is actually can be hotter because there's no rain. The rainy season is usually during our summer in North America. So yeah, you're gonna be in heat one way or another. So be ready for that.
Yeah. And the last thing is insurance. So some countries don't have liability insurance to buy. Some countries it's mandatory. So we'll try to remember and break it down in the next part.
Yeah, and some countries, I know some people have asked this about like, oh, I'm concerned I want full coverage.
Yeah.
Right, so some countries really, in fact, kind of difficult to find full coverage insurance. So, you know, you kind of have to do some of that research yourself, because we never bought full coverage insurance, except for we bought for 1 year of insurance in Mexico when we crossed year and a half ago now
Yeah.
from California to Mexico, just because we knew we were going to be in Mexico for a while, and the insurance for like a couple months wasn't that much less than insurance for a whole year. So insurance is something that most of the countries will require it, and we'll talk about which ones didn't. That's probably easier. And most of the countries that require it will have somebody selling insurance right there at the border, if not near the border.
Yeah. And that's all part of your prep work too. When you pick a border, you go on iOverlander, and then you read the most current comments, and they'll say, oh, go to the building with the red roof, and that's where you get insurance, and it costs this much, so you're prepared, and nothing's a big surprise, or, you know, to make your day a little easier.
Yep. So with that said, we can go into each country, and we're going to talk about 7 border crossings here with you guys, starting from Mexico into Belize. We have a video specifically about Mexico into Guatemala, which we did, so we can refer you to that one if that's the border you're crossing. But since we have that, we're going to talk about Mexico into Belize, because that's the second time we left Mexico going south. Mexico into Belize, there's a couple of unique things that they do. And what's nice for English speakers is that all Belize English is one of their official languages. So all of their documents are in English. Every customs agent speaks perfect English, so that works out really well for you. And one of the things that they have is they require you to do a couple of things ahead of time before you cross.
We didn't talk about what we need to do in Mexico to leave, but
Okay, we can talk about that. I mean, leaving Mexico, going in any direction is the same, but well, except for going back into the U.S., I guess you don't have to
yeah, you don't have to do
get stamped out.
Before you enter Belize, you have to exit Mexico. And you have a choice to make. Do you cancel your tip? Or if you have an RV, a 10-year RV tip, or do you keep it? We decided to cancel ours because we didn't know when we're going to come back to Mexico, and we didn't want to have it open.
Our rule of thumb is always cancel our tip, at least at this current phase of our lives, because if you don't cancel your tip, if you have a 6-month tip, you should cancel always, because it's not likely that you're going to come back unless you specifically know that you will come back within the next 6 months, and you'll be in there and leave before that 6 month is over. But if you have a 10-year tip, this is the one where it's kind of, you got to decide for yourself. For us, we always cancel, because if you don't cancel your tip in Mexico and you sell your car, or you come back with a different car, you cannot get a new tip for that new car until you cancel the old one. And if you sell your car to somebody without a canceled tip, the tip is still in your name, that person can't get a tip for that vehicle if they decide to come to Mexico. Okay. So these are the things that you don't know until it's too late.
Yeah, it's a big headache, so we just cancel it, and then hopefully it works out best for us.
Yeah, but it did bite us once because we had a 10-year tip when we came into Mexico from California, and then we canceled when we left to go back in through Belize into Mexico. And then, we canceled at the Guatemala border. And then when we went back into Mexico from Belize, they didn't want to give us a 10-year tip. They said that we're not a motorhome, that we are, because our South Dakota registration says RV, recreational vehicle.
Yeah.
And from the U.S., our RV, we know what an RV is. It's a motorhome. It's the same thing. But from Belize into Mexico, they look at recreational vehicle. They don't interpret that as an RV or as a motorhome. They think it's like a pleasure, a toy, like a
ATV.
4x4 or ATV or side-by-side, or some kind of non-motorhome type vehicle. So they didn't want to give us a 10-year tip then. So we had to go back with a 6-month tip, which is kind of a hassle. So now we've left again and we've canceled. So that's not a big deal anymore. But that's why we always cancel, because, if we decide to sell our car before we go back to Mexico again, we don't want to have to deal with that hassle.
We're not planning to, but you just never know what's going to happen in the future. So we're just like to be prepared.
Yeah, and getting a tip is not that expensive. So to have that flexibility to not have to deal with that, is worth it to us. But maybe you'll never sell your car for the next 10 years and it's an RV or a motorhome and you're okay keeping it, and that's fine too.
And when you exit also, they double check that you paid for your FMM and that you have a receipt for it. So
that's your 6-month tourist visa, basically.
So we, when we exited Mexico the first time into Guatemala, it was fine. But the second time when we exited from Mexico into Belize, which is this little section's about, we did a flight in between and stored our car in Mexico, and we didn't repay for an FMM because our other one was still valid, but they somehow canceled it. It was just a mess. So we had to repay because we didn't have a receipt, and our flight itinerary.
Because when you fly in, FMM is built into the cost of your flight. So you don't get a separate receipt or a separate document. But that's what they look for at the land border.
Yeah. So basically, we had to pay again, and it might have been a little bit of a bribe situation.
A little scammy feeling.
I didn't get a receipt, but she insisted, and everybody...
It was like $20 a person.
Palooka was free, so just have your receipt ready because we didn't.
And when we say the receipt, we literally mean like the paper receipt that you get, not the actual FMM card. They won't even accept those if you have them.
Yeah.
Those are not receipts. So they're just looking for reasons to charge you more, because you can't get these FMM cards without having paid. So I don't understand why they still need the paper receipt, but they will ask for that. And this is specifically also at that border, Mexico into Belize, from Quintana Roo, because there's a other couple who asked us about it, and they were crossing that border, and they didn't have a receipt, and they had trouble too.
Okay.
So that's coming out of Mexico into Belize.
Okay.
Tourist tax. And now when you get into Belize, a couple of things that you have to do ahead of time is, if you have pets like us, they have a website where you have to fill out an online form.
Yeah, and it could take up to 5 business days to get it back. For for us, the first time we did it was like 4 days, and the second time was only a 1-day turnaround. So you never know.
You just get an email with
Yeah.
a number, right?
Yeah, that it was accepted or something like that.
And then once you get to the border, so you have that window afterwards, after you get the reply that they've received it, you have a window to get to the border, and then they have you in their database.
I think they email you a PDF.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I had to like email the agents my paperwork so they can print it out.
So we didn't have to print it out, or didn't print it out.
Yeah, we should.
But we should have printed out, because then you can just hand that over at the border.
Because then you're at the border and your phone doesn't work, and you're like, I don't know how to email you. You have AirDrop.
And in Belize, you have to pay for a entry fee. No, you pay when you leave?
No, when you enter.
Okay, you pay when you enter.
Yeah.
So you pay like a tourist tax when you enter. And they use Belizean dollars. So, and it's kind of pegged to the US dollar exchange-wise, but it's 50 cent US dollars to one Belizean dollar. So it's 2 to 1, 2 Belizean to 1 US dollar. So when they say it's like 10 Belizean, it's 5 US. So you just have to kind of remember that, because and for the most part, they'll accept US dollars too, even though Belize has its own currency. So you can kind of lump Belize into that category of El Salvador, Panama, and most of Costa Rica, that they'll accept US dollars.
And I think for the pet import, I think it was like $45 for the cats, and we didn't have enough Belizean dollars, but we paid partially in US dollars. So we're using two currencies to pay for one thing.
And they'll give you change in
never
whatever they have. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you stamp yourself in Belize, you pay a tourist tax. I think maybe Luca was cheaper because he was younger. Then we worked up with to get a
And then for a tip, they have a couple of different levels of tip. Like you can do like a quick transit, which gives you like 24 hours. I think you can get through if you're just going to drive through Belize into Guatemala or vice versa into Mexico. Then you technically don't need to pay for a tip. They can just give you like a 24-hour transit permit. First time, that's what we did. We transited from Guatemala to Mexico in 24 hours. But the second time, we got a 7-day tip, which we heard that the free one is maybe good up to 7 days. So we don't know for sure. But I feel like the second time we ended up paying for a 7-day tip.
Yeah.
So, you just have to tell them how many days you're going to be there. Make sure that they give you the right amount of days, because we only had 7 days. So we had to leave. But we were in a hurry to try to get down to Costa Rica anyways. So we paid for a tip there, which is pretty easy to do. There's a immigration window that you go to at first, and then once you get past that, the next one is the customs window, and then you do your tip paperwork there. Bring your copies, bring your originals, and then you pay at a different window around the corner, and you come back, and then you're done. But they'll give you the tip. But what you'll have to do then is to go inside Belize, out of the immigration area, and then there's a insurance place, and you buy insurance. So they'll tell you exactly where it is. We've bought insurance at 2 different crossings, and it's both pretty easy, and it's also pretty inexpensive. It's just liability.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty easy to do.
I feel like it was under $20 for a week.
Yeah, and the first time, and you have to do it because not far after you cross the border, there's going to be police checkpoints, and they will check, and it's obligatory. You have to have it, and if you don't, you get fined. So just because they let you go, and if you choose to not stop at that insurance place, they'll most likely catch you. So that's Belize. Belize is pretty easy, especially for English speakers. Yeah,
because we spend like a year in Mexico, and we're so used to speaking Spanish that we show up and we're like, hola, and they're like, hello. Like, oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and you chit-chat them up. They'll tell you places to go eat, places that they like, Unfortunately, we only had 7 days. So we did go to a couple places that they recommended. So, and then from Belize, we crossed into Guatemala.
Okay.
In Guatemala, we crossed into 2 different times, and this time we crossed into the border from Belize into Guatemala, same one that we did a coming the other way. And this one was, I want to say it was more or less the same as crossing from Mexico.
It was less like chaos.
Yeah.
It was like more of an empty no man's land and more organized versus going to Guatemala from Mexico. It was like vendors and dogs and
Yeah, I think mostly
vehicles.
just because of the border, the way that the border is set up. This particular border from Belize into Guatemala, once you get to the other side, there's a bridge.
yeah.
And you have to pay a fee to enter the town at the other side of the bridge.
Yeah.
So because it's that bridge, there's not a lot of people standing on the bridge going back and forth.
Yeah.
Whereas
It's
the other
nice.
one,
The roads were nicer and paved there, so your first welcome into Guatemala was like brand new paved roads versus the other way was a little
yeah,
sketchier.
because that route has a lot of tourists coming in from, like, if you fly to Cancun and you want to go see like Mayan ruins.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of buses take people from Cancun all the way down through Belize into Guatemala to go see Tikal. You know, so I think there's a lot of tourism money there. I mean, it's still very Central American. It still, you know, has the same Latin American vibe, but it's nicer than most, I would say. And we had to do all the same stuff there. Go into a building, get stamped out from Belize, and then once we get into the Guatemala side, park, go into the building, get stamped in, pay for our fumigation, and then we had to wait for the agricultural guy to come. Usually, you know, there's always some kind of wait.
Yeah.
It just depends on how long you're waiting. If you're lucky, you just blow right through. But this time we had to wait for our agriculture guy. He was on a lunch break, and we had to go make some copies. I think we had to get copies of the stamp that we just got in our passport.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to do that. And then there's the other thing you want to be aware of is that there's going to be a lot of like helpers, right? They'll come to your window. Some of them will wear like official looking shirts and hats, but you'll be able to tell the real ones from the fake ones because as similar as they try to look, like they won't have a badge or they won't have an ID tag or they won't have
Emblem
something
on their shirt.
right? But they'll come to your window and they'll try to help you. They'll take your documents and then they'll say, "Oh, yeah, let me go do this for you."
Yeah.
But then you end up like hostage, right? To like work with them and then pay them a fee. And sometimes these people can get a little aggressive. And we don't have any personal experience with it. We've heard people that handed over their passport and their paperwork. And then they're just at the whim of what they want to charge. And they'll give them like $20 and they'll be like, that's not enough.
Yeah.
Right? So you kind of want to, if you can handle to do this all yourself, just, you know, tell them, no gracias,
Yeah.
you know, you want to do it yourself. Or you can, for the most part, just like ignore them if you don't feel comfortable, like having a conversation with them. Because the more you engage, the more they're going to try to get you to do things.
Yeah, and some people prefer to get help and don't
Yeah.
mind spending $40 or whatever for somebody to take them to all the windows. So it
Yeah.
just depends on what kind of traveler you are.
Yeah.
We prefer to,
If you don't mind spending 20, 40, 50 bucks
Yeah.
to get somebody to do this for you, because that's a lot of money for them, you know, so they're there. Somebody will do it if it's a busy day. Like, we'll talk about this later at the Honduras border. Like, we saw a family that got there after us. It was a huge long line, and then they got cut right in front and got in. It's because they paid a
yeah.
guy.
We have time and patience and want to do
Yeah.
it ourselves, and we're a little cheap, so
Oh,
you
sometimes
do you.
sometimes we'd rather spend that money doing something else.
Yeah.
So that's Guatemala, and then once you get in, it's pretty simple. You just have to pay a fee. I think it was like, I don't know, maybe $5 to cross the bridge from Belize into Guatemala.
Yeah.
And I remember crossing that bridge, and the guy at the bridge was like, saw that we had cats. He thought they were cute.
And Guatemala is going to be the first country where they don't have liability insurance at the border.
Right.
So it's going to feel
Right.
like,
You can find insurance, but we'll just say that we didn't have insurance in Guatemala.
yeah.
And Guatemala is one of the 4, what they call C4 countries. So what's important to note about the C4 countries, and there's also like, C4 countries, I think it's amongst themselves. They're kind of borderless for their citizens. So if you're from Guatemala, you can go to El Salvador, you can go to Honduras, you can go to Nicaragua. It's more or less like passport free.
Or visa free.
Visa free.
Yeah.
But for foreigners, it's a little bit different. For foreigners, you kind of have to abide by this like 90-day rule. So each country will have additional rules on top of that. But for the most part, the general rule is that once you enter any of the C4 countries, you can only stay 90 days total in these 4 countries. So that's Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Nicaragua.
You as a person.
You as a person.
90
Car is
days?
different. Car is like you get imported into each country, and then it's however many days you have in that country.
Something that is unique for Guatemala is your car has 90 days. And you cannot, if you use up your 90 days, you cannot re-enter, like leave and then come back for another 90 days. They ban you for 90 days. So have a plan.
You have to be out for 90 before you can come back again.
Yeah, so you can't just think
Which
you're
is part of the
borderline.
reason why when we left to go fly back to California, we decided to go fly from Cancun, leave Guatemala, fly from Cancun, even though we're only back for a family event for a few days, for a week. We had to be gone for 90 days because we weren't allowed back into Guatemala for 90 days.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why we stayed the whole summer basically in California. I think Costa Rica has a similar thing. A lot of the reasons why they do this is some expats will bring their own vehicles down and then they won't pay the import tax to get it registered in the country. And then they think they can just go out and come back with a new 90-day temporary permit.
No.
So this rule keeps that from happening.
Yeah.
So you pay the hefty tax to get it registered in Guatemala or Costa Rica. So that's getting into Guatemala. And then
Where do we go next, Dan?
from Guatemala we went to El Salvador.
That's right.
So from El Salvador, that was actually pretty easy. That's probably one of the easiest borders.
I think it was the easiest.
Yeah, because when you leave Guatemala, you have to drive pretty far because we left Antigua and then we drove to the border. And you go over a bridge and you see the sign, and there's somebody standing at the bridge to check your passport and then kind of tells you where to go. Your car has to be imported as always, but then first thing you do is you go to the immigration building, which is a pretty big building at this border that we crossed. You park and then you get in line. First thing you have to do at El Salvador is to pay a tourist tax. I think it was something like $10 a person.
Yeah.
And then once you pay a tourist tax, you get your passport stamped. The immigration area usually don't require any copies. All the copy stuff is for importing your car and your pets.
Yeah.
So in El Salvador, after we did our immigration, we go back out, we drive the car actually back to the bridge. There's a little hut outside of the main immigration office. That's the customs building. And it's like, it just looks like a broom closet.
Yeah.
There's like 3 guys there. They have like a little, temporary like easy up tent outside. They took our Guatemala expired or exit paperwork for the car, and they just use that and they copy all the information from that onto theirs. Again, you want to look at it and make sure it all looks good. And for El Salvador, there's no fee for importing your car. Most of the countries will have a fee to import your car. El Salvador, they just do it, boom, done. They didn't care about the pets either.
Well, I went in the office when you were doing the tip
Oh, you did?
paperwork.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't think he looked at it, but I paid a small fee and the kids were with me.
Yeah,
Cats
okay.
and backpacks. It was pretty simple.
So for the animal health certificates, generally speaking, it's good for within a certain window. It could be a week, could be 2 weeks, could be 30 days. So if you get from one place to another place relatively quickly, let's say it's good for 30 days for a country, and you'll know by looking on Overlander and look at the notes that people are leaving for that country. And for example, we went from Mexico all the way to El Salvador in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So we could use the same health certificate that we got from Mexico for all these different countries. But then once you get to a place with let's say they have to be within 7 days or 10 days or 2 weeks, then that's when you have to get a new one. So for El Salvador, I think we just used the Mexico one, and it was fine.
Yeah, and they didn't even print out a new pet import. They just stamped Guatemala.
The Guatemala one.
They're like, here's our stamp too. Done.
Yeah.
They really didn't care.
El Salvador has gotten very safe, pretty easy to navigate. The roads are also really good. In fact, when we drove down to the beach, once we got in, we were going to the surf spot. And the roads look like Southern California. Like you drive, you see the beach in the end. It's like really nice road, like fancy, residences on the side. So El Salvador is really easy. And leaving El Salvador, so this is the really difficult one that we did. We spent a week in El Salvador, and then when we left, so now we've spent 3 weeks, and we had a month to get from Mexico to Costa Rica. So now we only have 1 week left between Honduras and Nicaragua. So we had to basically choose to drive through Nicaragua. But from El Salvador to Nicaragua, you only go through like a little stretch of Honduras that's near the coast. The rest of Honduras is really big to the north side, and that has the border to the Caribbean Sea. So we decided that this day we're going to do 2 borders in the same day.
We could totally do it, we said.
You can do it, and I would still recommend that people do it.
It was a bad idea, though.
It was a bad idea in hindsight.
Yeah.
But we stayed the night a couple miles from the border at a truck stop. And El Salvadorian truck stops are not like Love's or normal truck stops in the U.S. It was a grungy, dingy place. It was cheap, it was near the border, it was convenient. There was a bathroom, there was a shower.
We used it. It was really grimy, but
we really were
scary. So sweaty and stressed out from border crossing days. We used those showers.
And we ended up staying at another truck stop once we got to Nicaragua that same night.
Oh, that one was worse.
That one was worse. But our big mistake to try to cross both in the same day. So getting out of El Salvador was pretty easy. We just we do the same thing. We check out, cancel the tip on the El Salvador side. And then again, we drive over a bridge. We got there super early. We got there like at 6 o'clock. At the Honduras check-in side, there was a huge line of people, like all the way around the immigration building. And there were 2 doors in.
But this is supposed to be like the quickest border for everybody. Yeah. Half an hour, you're in and out.
And it was half an hour once you got in.
Yeah.
The problem was the line was so long that it took us 5 hours to get in.
Yeah.
And we had seen this like Swiss family that pulled up at the truck stop the night before at the same truck stop. And we left before them, and we were already in line when we saw them pull up, and they park and they come to the end of the line. And then like the guy like goes away and finds a guy. And then the guy, he's waving his family to follow him, go all the way to the front, and then just takes him in. Basically cuts, right?
Yeah. Well,
so this is what I mean.
You
pay a helper so they can help you, but we don't know how much they paid. But maybe it's worth it to you. In this particular case, I think it was worth it for them because they would have waited just as long as we did. Now, once you got inside this building, though, you kind of do the same thing. There's a window on one side. There's a line on one side once you get in. So they make most people wait outside. They'll let in a certain number of people at a time. So the inside doesn't get too crowded. So once you get in, though, there's no one telling you where to go. So on one side is immigration, and the other side is customs, where you get your temporary import permit for your car. And we saw some people go there to just do their temporary import permit renewal. So they were already in Honduras, and then they wanted to extend their tip. So they come back, and they go up to the front to say, oh, I'm not here for immigration, I'm just here for my tip. And they're let in right away because it's 2 separate windows. One side had a lot of people for immigration, one side had very few people for customs. So if we knew, we could have said, hey, we're here to just do our vehicle customs.
Yeah.
And they would have let us in, but then we also would have been cutting. But that would have saved us probably like 4 hours of being there.
Yeah.
So we waited outside. This one was pretty straightforward once you got in. Passport, stamp, go to the other side. Copies of everything for your registration, title, no insurance again.
Oh, I think we went outside with the customs agent and they looked at our car and then we walked back to the window.
Yeah, and then you get your paper. And then, again, no insurance for Honduras.
Nope.
And we're just driving through anyway, so we drove through. But it did take us 6 hours to get through that. So we got there at 6 in the morning. We didn't get out until early afternoon.
Yeah.
So Honduras was a couple hours drive. So when we got to the Nicaragua border, this was one that we were dreading.
We were supposed to do a pet import, and we're like, "Where's the pet import?" He's like,
"Oh yeah, right."
So we're like, "I guess we're not doing a pet import for our." But it's only a few hours, so we decided to.
We took a chance.
Listen to that guy who said, "Forget about it. They're cats. Who cares?" Basically.
So maybe dogs would be a little different, but I doubt it because when we got to the Nicaragua border, I think you had to do some import papers for the cats, but they didn't really look at our Honduras paper.
Or we didn't have one.
Yeah, we didn't have one, but they didn't care.
They didn't care.
So maybe you can do it if you want. There was on Overlander there was a sign for another building that you're supposed to go to, but we just skipped it. And we know people that have skipped these things. It's just that sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't, and when you don't get lucky is when you get nailed.
Yeah.
So, okay, now we talk about Nicaragua, which is notoriously slow and notoriously tricky, because Nicaragua is essentially a autocratic dictatorship. So they care a lot about things like drones, cameras, and they care a lot about the things that you're bringing in, what you're taking in, what you're taking out. So because of this, we knew that we could bring our cameras in. We did some research. You can bring like one camera per person and like one lens per person. And because there's 5 of us, we have multiple lenses and multiple cameras. We didn't have that many, so that we knew the cameras are okay. But drones are strictly forbidden.
Yeah.
So we shipped our drone from Antigua, Guatemala, over to Costa Rica. And you have to do this in a specific way too, so I'll tell you that in a little bit. But first things first, when you get to the border, it's a 2-lane road. You'll see, depending on which border you go, some borders are less busy. We got to this main border that goes from El Salvador through Honduras the shortest way. So I think that's probably why it's so busy. When you get to the Nicaragua side, they're just big rigs lined up for miles.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, you could just be waiting there, I presume for days to try to get through.
Years?
And what you're supposed to do as an overlander or as a private person that's not bringing a big rig through, just get on the wrong side of the road and just pass all of them.
Yeah.
Which we did. You feel kind of bad doing it, but that is what you're supposed to do. And then once you get to the front, you have to cross a bridge. And that bridge, it's a little tricky. You have to get out, and then if you're not big enough, you have to hop on the side of the sidewalk on the bridge and then drive over. So we did that. And you look back, you see all the trucks. And there's still more trucks coming. But then what you do is you park in front of the Nicaragua immigration building. There's a window outside of the building when you first go to. They'll ask for your passport. It's kind of like a pre-check.
Yeah, they write your name on a piece of paper.
Yeah, just on a scrap piece of paper.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that goes. Maybe they hand it to the person and they do start doing some background check or something. And then you go into the immigration office and there's a bunch of, windows. And then you go to one of those. You get in line with one of those. And then they stamp you in. This part's pretty easy. This part's pretty standard.
We filled a form and it's like, where are you going? And we just put a random place.
Most countries will ask you where you're going, where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Do you have an address?
Yeah.
Where you're staying. So just pick a campground or something like that. Yeah. And then at this point, the immigration guy knows that we have a car. So they know, okay, you're in for it. So after they did my paperwork, they're like, you go start doing the car first. So yeah, we go start doing the car, and then they want to look at everything. Some people get their whole car searched, and they'll look at everybody's car. Some people get their car like X-ray scanned. We were fully expecting them to X-ray scan our car, but they didn't do it for some reason. But I think one of the reasons, also they want you to take all your luggage out. They ask you how many pieces of luggage you have in your car, and then they want to X-ray all your luggage.
Yeah.
There's no way we're gonna take out our stuff and X-ray every single thing, so we just have them look at the car.
Yeah.
So then there's the guy that comes out, he's like, right away they'll ask you, do you have a drone? Do you have a drone? Drone, over multiple times, over and over again.
Yeah.
So you say, no, you don't have it, because we legitimately don't have it. But then like, I know that I have when I ship my drone, I just ship the drone, not the controller or the batteries, because those things have lithium batteries in them, and I know that it's tricky to ship those, so I kept them. And in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, I have all my other drone stuff, so if he finds that and I didn't tell him about it, it's gonna be awkward. So I told him, okay, I have the controller and the batteries, but I shipped my drone to Costa Rica. So then he said, okay, let me see the receipt from DHL from shipping. And then what they're looking for on the DHL receipt is for the receipt to say the drone's make and model. And that's really, really important.
Do we have that, Dan?
And I'll tell you how I know this. Is because my DHL guy chose like some random drop-down item, like personal items or something, right? So that it didn't say my make and model. And maybe this is why our customs fee on the Costa Rica side was kind of cheap.
Yeah, probably.
So don't do this. Don't try to save money on Costa Rican customs, because then your receipt won't say drone make and model on it, because that's what Nicaragua is going to look for. Because if it said what make and model drone I had on it, then they would have accepted that receipt. But because it didn't, their frame of mind is that, okay, you shipped something. We don't know what it is that you shipped.
But
you just have a receipt.
We had
I have an email.
We had an email from DHL that Costa Rica received our drone, and here's the proof. And then they're like, no, it's not a printed piece of paper. We can't believe the internet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're very skeptical, but for some reason they believe this printed piece of paper.
Which could have been totally fake.
Yeah. So we were at that border. They wanted to. So this guy that was in charge of looking through all my stuff, he got on his phone. He was taking pictures with his phone, and he was sending it to somebody in WhatsApp, presumably in one of the main offices. Is this okay? Is this okay? This is okay. And he keeps coming back saying, no, it's not okay. It's not going to be okay. I'm like, what can I do? And I showed him the controller and the batteries. Like, that's all I have, right? If there's no drone, if there's no battery, I don't have a drone. I have the battery and the controller. They're not drones.
Yeah.
So they didn't really know what to do. I didn't really know what to do. So we're kind of at a stalemate. And then at some point, they just decided, you know what? We're going to take your controller and your batteries away. Then you can go. And then we're like, this sucks, but I'm tired of being here. This is like 10 hours into border crossing for 2 borders. Let's just get this over with. So in my mind, I'm like, forget it. They can have these, whatever they want to do. So then they had to write up a report. We have to go to the National Police Office, and they had to write up a report and have to sign this document saying that I'm relinquishing these items. And then we have to go back to another office, and then the other office tells me, he's like, well, you can have these back if you go back to Honduras. I'm like, I'm not going back to Honduras. You can take them. It would be much nicer if they just had a DHL office there.
Yeah.
And I can just send that along too. But don't make the mistake I did. So 2 ways you can get around it. Make sure that you state the make and model on your receipt. Or second, when you say you don't have a drone, just don't mention anything about shipping it, right?
Because you don't have a drone.
You don't have a drone.
That was a mistake, maybe.
Right. But my concern was that if they find the other parts of the drone during a search, then I have more to explain. I didn't want to have to deal with that.
Our van might get ripped apart.
Yeah, so I guess the positive side of this story at Nicaragua is that because they were so distracted from dealing with this battery and controller of my drone, they didn't end up checking anything else in our car.
Yeah.
We didn't have anything else to show. They didn't even decide to x-ray our car.
Yeah.
So, still took 6 hours. Mm-hmm. And then you had to do something with the pets.
Yeah, paperwork. And I just remember standing there and just like drops of blood on the floor. I don't know, some dog had a rough day or something. I don't know. It was just, but we filled out some paperwork, paid, and got like an export or import permit for Nicaragua. And
they needed it. They needed something from Nicaragua to go into Costa Rica, which is another story we'll talk about after this.
Yeah. Well, Nicaragua is the first country where you have to export your pet. So from Nicaragua to Costa Rica to Panama, now instead of just importing your pet, now you're importing and exporting. So things get a little bit more complicated and pricey from this point on.
Right. It's a lot of nickel and diming. And so once you get into, eventually we get through and it was dark in Nicaragua, and then we pass and we're looking, and you have to buy insurance. Mm-hmm. Insurance is required and they will check. And then when we get past, we pull over to the side of the road and it's dark. We don't know which one. There's a bunch of like little restaurants and little stands selling stuff. We couldn't figure out which place sells insurance. So we asked somebody, where's the insurance person? And they're like pointing us back towards the border. We're walking, we don't see anybody. And then we see this lady sitting outside this restaurant eating something at a little table. So we're asking her, do you know where the insurance person is? Mm-hmm. She's like, I'm the insurance person. We're just a lady eating with some stray dogs next to her at a little table.
Was like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
So it's like $12 or something. I got a little piece of paper.
Yeah.
And then it was so dark, and I was like, let's just find this truck stop, which was like in the scariest
we're at another
bathrooms.
sketchy truck stop. And we'll put a photo of what the bathroom looks like at this truck stop. It was literally spray painted on the wall at the sink of the bathroom in this truck stop that says, "Don't puke in the sink." So some fun things that are happening there we don't know about. So yeah, that's Nicaragua. We stayed a few days in Nicaragua, and then we had to be in Costa Rica to meet my family who was visiting, coming down to meet us in Costa Rica. So we stayed probably a week, actually, right? We stayed a whole week there in Nicaragua. Mm. And leaving Nicaragua is one of the only check-out borders that took almost as long as checking in. Mm-hmm. So you have to do all the same things that you basically did checking in to go out, which I don't understand, right? Because I've been in here already. Whatever you don't want me to do, I could have done it. But they care when you leave. So we had to do some fairly expensive prep stuff for the pets to get them ready to get out.
We had to go get a new health certificate, and then you take this like number and you make a bank account at the official bank of Nicaragua, and then you have to figure out how to pay for that special number that they give you.
We had to go to 2 different offices.
And then you get that, once you have a receipt that you paid at the bank, then you go to another office, and then they stamp your paperwork, and then you're ready to go to the border.
So basically it's this. The vet will give you the certificate, and then you go to the bank to pay. Mm-hmm. And after you paid, you take the proof that you've paid to the agricultural office to officially get the paperwork required at the border. So it would be nice if they can do all of this at the border, but they don't. Mm-hmm. So you have to do this before you get to the border. Then when we get to the border, it's madness trying to figure out where these offices are, because this border was pretty big that we were at. There's a lot of stuff happening, big parking lot. And then one of the common themes about this particular border, both coming in and going out, is that the people there didn't really want to be helpful. Like they were on their phones ignoring you. Even when you're at the right person and you're saying, I'm here to do this, and they look up from their phone, they're like, no, go to that person. And then you like, I just was at that person. They say, you're the guy. You go back to him and say, hey, I need this. This is what you do. He's like, okay, fine. Then he puts his phone down and he gives you the stamp. So you have to deal with that. And that contributes to the delay.
Yeah.
Not everybody's like that. For example, like the person who was doing our the pet paperwork, he was literally there doing all this paperwork for a long time for two cats. But it took him a while to actually get there. We were waiting outside for him to come back from wherever he was. But once he started doing it, yeah, he was doing a lot of work getting it all done. Yeah. And then we had to go get some kind of stamp for the car, and then once we got the car stamp, we had to come to the police booth and get the police to inspect our car.
Because when you come in, they write down, oh, you have 2 surfboards, you have this like on the outside and some things that you own, and so when you exit the country,
they want you to take it all.
They make sure you still have that stuff and you didn't sell it, or you have to pay some kind of taxes. So
luckily, again, they didn't look that closely when we were checking out.
No, but it still took 4 hours.
It still took a long time. And then once you leave Nicaragua, you're in no man's land, and you still have to do Costa Rica. So this is another long day, because once we got to the Costa Rica side, there was a bunch of running around. Like, entering Costa Rica is pretty straightforward. Yeah. They have a immigration window. You go up, and this is the first one, and probably going all the way back to Belize, where the immigration officer spoke English. So he stamped us in, gave him the passport, no questions, looked through them, stamps in. He says, welcome to Costa Rica.
Yeah, I got 6 months.
Yep, 6 months, pura vida. First pura vida probably we got.
Yeah.
And then you have to go pay for the cats or dogs or whatever you have. But you can only pay this at the bank.
Yeah.
You try to go to the bank, except the bank, when we got there, the bank was closed. So I had to go to a different bank, which we had to walk through a bunch of
like trucks.
Parking lot. It was another like agriculture kind of office thing.
Yeah.
So you had to pay there. So luckily they accept US dollars for this payment, so we were able to pay that. And then we go get our tip at a little window across from the immigration booth. And the tip, this one was really weird. Like, usually you get a pretty legit looking certificate.
Yeah.
This one, they did the tip, and then we just get a number.
Yeah, it was like a little piece of paper.
Little piece of paper, and it just had a number on it, and that was your tip.
Because you need to get insurance.
Right.
So that's like the official paperwork.
So then we're done at the border. Then we drive about a quarter mile away. There's another building, and that building was where you buy insurance. And again, it's required. You buy insurance, which you buy. The insurance number of days that you buy matches the number of days you have on your tip, which in Costa Rica is 90 days. 90 days for the car, 180 days for the people.
Yeah.
So I mean that's the discrepancy you find in a lot of places. The car is in for usually a different amount of time, except for Mexico. Mexico is 6 months, or 6 months, 10 years. But so at the place where you buy insurance, there's also another office in Costa Rica. It's a federal. I think this is their agriculture thing. It's called SENASA. SENASA is where you get your pets checked in.
Yeah.
And we were expecting to have some kind of certificate from them.
Yeah. We didn't get anything.
We didn't get anything.
I think they maybe stamped Nicaragua's export permit. And I'm like, where's the paper? And he's like, we don't issue papers.
Well, because we had heard that people had gotten pulled over and were asked to show paper for their pets.
Yeah, so I think maybe that backfired because I researched on iOverlander. Maybe somebody made a mistake saying they got a paper. I'm like, well, somebody else got a paper.
Yeah.
So, but no paper.
No paper. SENASA is the name of the agency. And then ever since then, Marlene's been asking for SENASA in all the other countries, but this is just for Costa Rica. That's called SENASA.
Don't be me.
Okay, so now we're officially in Costa Rica.
Okay.
So we spent like 3 months in Costa Rica, and then we got to, instead of crossing on the Pacific side, we ended up crossing into Panama, which is where we are now, on the Caribbean side. Because we heard the Caribbean side is more chill, easier. Because we had heard some nightmares about crossing between Costa Rica and Panama also. Because a lot of expats live in Costa Rica, but they don't have residency, so they're just living there on tourist visas, and it's 90 days at a time, or no, 6 months at a time.
Yeah.
So they do border hops. It doesn't work for your car, but it works for people. So they cross into Panama on the Pacific side a lot, but we went on the Caribbean side, which is supposed to be easier, and it sort of is. It's just tricky. You get to the Caribbean side, and then you park in this kind of unlabeled lot, and you have to walk away from your car and go find this window. First of all, there's a big overpass bridge that goes into Panama, but you don't want to go on it because once you're on it, you can't get off until you get to the other side. So you have to park, you have to go away from it and then walk to a window next to a bunch of shops. That's the immigration. And then you pay a fee to leave Costa Rica, and then you get your passport stamped out. Then you get back in your car. Mm-hmm. Where do we cancel our tip?
We went to a little window and they gave us a piece of paper, which was something I couldn't find once we crossed into Panama.
Right. There's another window.
And you had to pay tourist tax to leave. Okay, so for pets, before you go into Panama, you need to get your stuff together to export out of Costa Rica. So we went to a vet right near the border. And
on the Caribbean side, we had to go to a town. Mm-hmm. And this is on Islander. All the Islander, if you flip on, like, there's one that's called like Pets or something. Yeah. One of the filters. And you'll see it at pretty much every border. There's a lot of people bring pets. Most people are bringing dogs, but there's some people bring cats too. Mm. So they'll do at all these. So there was one that we went to.
Cajita.
Yeah.
Okay, so instead of going to a vet near San Jose, it was cheaper for us to go by the border. It was still expensive. It was about $100 a cat. But she actually, the time-consuming part can take up to a week to get a stamp from. Yeah, because
they don't do everything at the vet's office.
Yeah.
To get out of Costa Rica, it has to be officially done at the government office. And the SENASA office.
Yeah, SENASA, and that's headquartered in San Jose. And if you go to another vet, somewhere in the country, it takes like over a week to get the stamp.
And San Jose is far from the border.
Yeah. But because we did it near the border, the SENASA building was there also. So she actually drove, and I was headed back within a few hours.
I think it's also because on the Caribbean side is probably better for this because the Caribbean side has major ports that stuff comes in and out. So I think she drove to the town of Colón, I think, which was a Limon, right? Mm-hmm. That was a port town, and that port town must have had a SENASA office. So because we were on that side, it was easier for us to do that.
And the Caribbean side for pets, it's supposed to be way cheaper. Also,
Caribbean sides is way cheaper generally for everything.
Yeah, so
food, Airbnb, and
but for border, like pets are going to be expensive, so that one is going to save you some money.
So once we got to the Panama side, we got all of our stuff checked out. We go to the Panama side, and then you finally get back on the bridge that you're supposed to avoid going over to, or before you check out of Costa Rica. Then you get back and you actually go over the bridge this time. And on the bridge, they'll tell you, once you get down to the bottom of the bridge, make a quick U-turn and come back next to the bridge again. Mm-hmm. So then over there, you got to find a place to park. And there's a tiny parking lot. Fits maybe like 5 cars. And then you park there, and then you take your passport and you walk over to a row of windows for immigration. They stamp you in. This one, they insisted on all of us being separated with our own passport, and they do one person at a time. Whereas all the other ones, we've been able to just say, hey, there's 5 of us, here's all of our passports.
Yeah, we took our pictures, and I think we did our fingerprints. Yeah. It was like a whole thing for Panama.
To go into Panama. Then once we've done that, we go and get our tip. Oh, you went to go do the pets, which is a separate agricultural window. And I was trying to do the tip. And then when you go enter your tip, you have to have your usual photocopies of registration, title, all that. You're supposed to have insurance for your foreign insurance to be valid. So we keep our Geico liability insurance in the U.S., which is like $25, $30 a month, but nobody has ever checked.
Yeah.
But I assume that if you ever have to file claims, like that's when it will come up. So you do want to keep your U.S. insurance valid, just liability. But the tricky thing about Panama tip that's different from everywhere else is that Panama tip, before they issue you a tip, you have to buy the insurance first. Mm-hmm. So you spend the money, buy the insurance, and if there is any holdups getting the tip, you've got insurance and no tip. Our holdup at the border in Panama was that the insurance lady was
That was lunch break.
Almorzano.
Yeah, so bad timing.
Yeah. So she was having lunch, and we waited an hour or maybe a little more than an hour for her to come back. Then we go in to get insurance, and she knows exactly what to do. She only gives you, by default, it's 30 days.
Yeah.
We don't know if you can get a longer than 30-day tip at the border, but we were only offer a 30-day tip. So that means we'll only offer a 30-day insurance. This is the tricky part, is that if you're continuing south, you're going to ship to South America, you need to realize that your tip has to be valid when your boat, well, before you bring it to the port. So your boat may be delayed,
Which ours was.
And if it is delayed and you go past your 30-day limit, then you have to go renew your tip.
Yeah, so we had to do that.
Luckily,
Insurance first.
Yeah, luckily you can renew your tip in Panama City. You
Yeah.
don't have to go back to the border.
Yeah.
And we had to do that. And renewing our tip was pretty easy. Same process, basically. You have to go buy insurance first. So you take your old insurance, you go to an insurance place. The place is in town. In Panama City, you drive there, and then, you just hand them the paper again with copies, and then you get another 30 days.
Yeah.
And you do get a piece of paper. And in Panama, after we got our tip, after we got our insurance, we use it with all the other stuff to get our tip. And once we got our tip, I went to go meet you at the agricultural place.
Yeah.
And the agricultural place, we were there on a Saturday. So they're supposed to have like the main boss there, like inspect and do some kind of sign off. And the guy was not there over the weekend.
Yeah.
So they promised that we'll get something in our email.
Yeah.
On Monday.
Never showed up.
Never came.
I called and everything. It's just like, forget it.
Yeah. So we thought that was going to be a problem, for us to like get checked out of Panama and stuff like that. But
Nobody cared.
nobody seems to care. But we're still in Panama. We haven't left. So we'll see
Yeah.
if anything happens at the airport. I don't think anything's going to happen, but
I mean, so like we're not going to talk about the next thing because that's shipping.
Yeah.
But
that's not Central
if
America
that's
related.
the end of your trip, then you're going to turn around and good luck doing all the steps back. And I'm glad we don't have to do that because now we're going to ship to Colombia
It's
and
a lot
see how
of
the
borders.
process.
It's a lot of borders to cross, relatively short distance, because most of these countries are pretty small.
Yeah.
So, but it does take a long time to drive. When you see like, from Belize to Antigua is like 200 miles or something, maybe 200 and change.
Yeah.
And like in the U.S., I do that in 3 hours on the highway, going 75 miles an hour. But no, in Central America, that's an 8-hour drive all day, basically.
Yeah.
So it's slow going, and you come all the way down here. So yeah, if you're done here and you want to drive back, you could just drive back and do the same thing that you've done. If you want to go see those places again, or some places maybe you didn't get to see, you want to see them again. But be aware that if you're going to go back, let's say you expended all of your days in Costa Rica like we did, we can't go back to Costa Rica for 90 days because we already spent, or our car can't go back to Costa Rica for 90 days. We can, but the vehicle has to stay out for 90 days before it can go back in. So if you've done the same thing and you want to drive back, then you have to basically stay in Panama for 90 days. That means you have to extend your tip twice, possibly 3 times, depending on, how strict they are at the border. And then you have to deal with all the borders coming back. So maybe if you're not going to South America, you can just still ship your car back to Galveston.
Ooh. Yeah.
Right? Because you save yourself a lot of hassle, and you may not save any money with the fuel, and especially if you have pets like us, all the pet, doctor's visits and stuff.
Yeah, it adds up.
Stuff like that. That all adds up, So if it's just shipping to Texas, it's like a week.
Yeah.
Right? So it's pretty easy. And then you just enjoy your time in Panama City, like we are, get a hotel once your car's gone, and once it's on its way, hop on a plane, and then you're back. Or you'll do what we're doing next, which is South America. But that's for another episode.
Yeah. So hopefully this was helpful for people who are thinking about doing the Pan Am and coming through Central America. Hopefully we covered everything.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the very specific, minute details we didn't include because those things can change anyways. And also are things like, well, how much is, a tourist tax in this border versus that border? That's not that significant. I think it's mostly about the process.
Right.
Right. What papers you need and stuff like that. And we're trying to cover as much of that as we can here. So I hope that was helpful for you guys. And, we don't know if there's a comprehensive one-stop shop for all of the Central American information out there. So we thought we'd make one like this instead of having you guys go and find different content, different border crossing videos for each of these. So this way, if you're coming down the Pan Am and you made it this far into this episode, we appreciate you for that. We hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it's not too boring. We put some stories in there, some of our trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
So it's not all fun. In fact, most border days are not fun, but they're just part of the experience.
Yeah.
So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed our episode 24 of our Freely Roaming podcast.
Yeah, next one will be an interview, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you also.
Yeah, so the next one may coincide with a video that we made with the people who we interviewed.
Yeah, it could be good timing.
Maybe good timing,
yeah.
But that's going to be a secret. I want you guys to stay tuned, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on our Molly Mish YouTube channel to see our videos. I'm going to be uploading a video from Guatemala all the way to Costa Rica, basically.
Yeah.
Similar to what this topic was about. That's going to be our next travel vlog. So thank you guys as always for sticking around, and we appreciate you. And we'll see you guys in South America.
Bye.